Good evening. I will call to order the City of West Bend Plan Commission for July 7th and acknowledge that we have a quorum except for Commissioner Fleischman, who is absent and excused. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll start with item number 3, approval of the minutes for the Plan Commission regular meeting on June 2nd.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. It's been motion second. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Move on to item number 4, developmental proposals and zoning amendments. With item number 1, ZA-20-001, a public hearing at 6 o'clock p.m. to rezone 204 South 7th Avenue from RD2 two-family residential district to B5 neighborhood office and service district by Kettle Moraine Bible Church. If there's anybody from the public who would like to speak on this item, please come up to the podium. Seeing none, I'd be looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we'll go to Jim. Did you have anything on this item?
For this item, all that we're asking is that the Plan Commission make a recommendation to the council for the rezoning from the RD2 two-family residential to the B5 neighborhood office and service district. This request is consistent with all the other approvals and recommendations that we had for that land use change for this property. So we would recommend approval of the zoning amendment. As a note to staff, did not receive any comments or concerns regarding the rezoning on this from the publication.
Great. Thank you. I look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second. Is there any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move on to B, conditional use permits. And item 1, CU-20-004, a public hearing at 6:01 p.m. for a request for a conditional use permit to allow for ground and building mounted solar PV electronic system at 1100 Schmidt Road by Sunvest Solar Inc., with the applicant being Elias Velasco and agent is Tyson Strankman. If there's anybody who'd like to speak for the public hearing, feel free to come up to the podium.
I'm here with Sunvest. If there's any questions or anything, I'm here to answer those.
Sounds great. Then I'll be looking for a motion to end the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the public hearing? Seeing none, all those in favor, so by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. And we'll see if there's any comments from our Business and Development Director, Jim.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the brief for both the conditional use and the site plan. We'll just have 2 separate action items on it since they are they go hand in hand with everything. So Sunvest Solar has submitted a conditional use permit for the 1100 South Schmidt Road. It is for the Regalware building. The 46.9 acre parcel is zoned M2, which is heavy industrial. In accordance to the zoning code for the M2, a conditional use permit is required to install utility infrastructures within that zoning district. So the need for a conditional use for this is required. So the proposal includes 2 solar panel arrays. One is on the roof mount and one is ground mount. The roof mount will be located on the southwestern corner of the building in an area that's approximately 340 by 370 feet. The ground mount array will be located at the southeast corner of the building, kind of tucked in the corner between the building, since it is L-shaped within the grassed area, and that will occupy about an area that's 467 feet by 293 feet. This area will be fenced in with a chain link fence. The solar arrays on the ground are essentially 480 feet from the Schmidt Road right-of-way, and they're 198 feet from the southern property line. So it is tucked in for, fairly far back from the right-of-ways out there. All property owners within 200 feet were notified of the public hearing. Staff received only 3 general inquiries, basically asking where they were going to be located, or the ground portion solar arrays were going to be located. If the commission finds everything to be acceptable, staff would recommend approval of the conditional use with 3 listed conditions, and also with the site plan with 1 condition. Also to note that on the site plan portion, a stormwater management plan was not required for this development proposal.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jim or Tyson?
I got a question for Jim. Is this going to be very similar looking to what's on River Road? That's right, a couple blocks away, the ground stuff. Very
Yeah, this
similar?
is it's very similar to what we have with the on the county grounds.
Yep, and it's all enclosed, kind of like
Yep.
River Road, same deal.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'd be looking for a motion on the conditional use permit. Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then we'll move on to the site plan for the same project. Again, that's SP-20-009, ground and building mounted solar electronic system at 1100 Schmidt Road by Sunvest Solar. And we're looking for an action on that item as well.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We'll move on to number 2, SP-20-003, Taco Bell, a reapplication, architectural building material changes at 2356 West Washington Street by Excel Engineering. The applicant is Steve Kearns of Matrix Title, and agent is Robert Lodel of Excel Engineering. Jim.
Thank you. Just got to give me 1 minute. I need to grab my memo for that one.
Sure.
Essentially what the Taco Bell Corporation is asking for architectural building elevation changes. Back in March of this year, the Plan Commission approved the site plan for that development. The original proposal comprised of 3 different color earth tone bricks with some metal awnings on the drive-through windows and the entrance areas. The architectural elevations have been revised to incorporate a dark gray and a light gray brick for the majority of the building. And then at the northwest corner of the building, they revised the materials to be a rust-colored pre-finished metal panel. Metal awnings are still being proposed over the main entranceways and the drive-through, but they've also added some additional awnings over the window openings on the south and west sides. Staff felt that the change was significant enough to warrant the commission to review and make any comment on the new proposal. If the commission finds the elevations to be acceptable, staff would recommend approval of the amendment of the elevations.
Thank you. Any questions for Jim? Seeing none, I'll be looking for a motion.
Motion approved.
And motion second. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Moving on to D, Certified Survey Map, number 1, CSM-20-010, 2 lot CSM to alter the common property line at 22-1 and 235 Arbor Point Avenue by JBJ Companies. Jim.
Thank you. This certified survey map is to modify the common property line between these 2 lots that were originally platted in the River Edge subdivision. Essentially, we're moving the common lot line north 10 feet to provide setback relief for the structure on lot number 2 that is going to be built. Both the properties are zoned RS4. Both properties also still meet the zoning requirements for area and frontages and the CSM also identifies all the existing easements for the utilities and stormwater, and staff would recommend approval of the CSM.
Thank you. Any questions for Jim? Seeing none, I'll be looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then we'll move on to E, extraterritorial certified survey maps with number 1, XCSM-20-011, 2-lot CSM at 1950 East Paradise Drive to alter the common property line by Brian Buckman. The applicant's Brian Buckman, and the agent is Richard Simon of Cornerstone Land Survey. Jim.
Thank you. This certified survey map, again, it's out in the it's extraterritorial, so it's out in the township of Trenton. It's approximately a mile southeast of the city limits. The purpose is to redefine the property line between these two properties. Again, we're moving the property line approximately 100 feet to the east. The CSM is within the city's planning area and is identified as single-family residential in our comprehensive plan. Both lots contain existing homes on them, and the CSM also identifies a 17-foot right-of-way reservation being provided for Paradise Drive, which is consistent with the city's official map, and staff would recommend approval of that CSM.
Thank you. Any questions for Jim? Seeing none, I'll be looking for a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
There's been motion second. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then we'll move on to number 2, XCSM-20-009, create 2 lots at 5064 Highway P by Quam Engineering. The applicant is Horlowis Industries, Inc., and the agent is Kevin Parrish of Quam. Jim.
Thank you. This extraterritorial CSM is approximately a third of a mile south of the city on the east side of County Trunk Highway P. The purpose of the CSM is to create 2 industrial lots to separate the existing buildings into separate lots for future sale. The CSM is within the city sanitary sewer surface area and is also identified in our comprehensive plan as single-family residential in the 2020 plan. The CSM is also within the transition area D in the cooperative boundary agreement between the city and the town of West Bend. Lot 1 is 1.8 acres and has 2 existing buildings on it, and Lot 2 will be 8.2 acres and has several buildings on that one. Both properties will share a common 30-foot wide shared access to County Trunk Highway P, and Lot 2 also has a secondary existing access on the southern end of that property. A right-of-way reservation is needed for County Trunk Highway P and will need to be provided consistent with the city's official map prior to getting signatures for recording. Staff would recommend approval of the CSM with the condition that the right-of-way reservation be provided for County Trunk Highway P.
Thank you. Any questions for Jim? Seeing none, I'll be looking for a motion.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Been motion seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we'll move on to F, discussion items, with number 1 being a discussion and recommendation to set a public hearing for a change in the recommended land use from industrial to multifamily residential in the 2020 comprehensive plan for the city of West Bend for approximately 15.1 acres of land located at 285 Sand Drive by the Department of Development, and the applicant is us. Jim.
Thank you. So a request has been made to the department to amend the comprehensive plan and a possible zoning change for 15.1 acres located at the 285 Sand Drive. This is the former Yars Ready Mix plant in that area. The property is for sale, and the potential buyer would like to construct a multifamily development consisting of senior living and multifamily residential units. The use would require a land use change and a zoning change, and the current recommended land use for this area is still the industrial, which was acknowledged as part of the previous use. The surrounding land uses include single-family to the east, south, and northeast, industrial to the and wetlands to the north, institutional uses to the northeast and the southwest, and the Eisenbahn Trail abuts this property on the west side, along with future Vine Street right-of-way to the south. There is a significant landscaping berm along that eastern edge of the property that was constructed as a part of the Tuckaway subdivision. Given the grade change throughout the sites and the wetland separations to the north, along with the right-of-way on the south and the trail to the west, this proposed land use could be considered since it would, there is enough physical change and separation between these uses. If the comprehensive plan would be endorsed by the Plan Commission, the zoning amendment would be filed, also requesting the change from RM2 to RM4 multifamily residential. If the Plan Commission would find this proposal to be acceptable, staff would recommend that a public hearing be set for September 1st of 2020 to hear any comments and concerns pertaining to the land use change. At the same time, if everything is approved by the Plan Commission for that, we could also hold a public hearing for the zoning amendment where it would be changed from the M2 heavy industrial to the RM4 multifamily residential.
Got it. Thanks, Jim. Are there any questions or discussion items for Jim?
I got a question, Jim. Would, again, that ends at the Yars property. Down the line, would that carry all the way out? If you okay this now, or we okay it down the line, will that carry out all the way to Decorah? Because if We Energies moves out of there, I mean, would that open up all the way through to Decorah someday, or? Because they're right next door, and.
Correct.
Right. And
yeah, We Energy is right to the north. That's industrial. Then once you get further north of them, then it actually changes over to commercial.
It does. It's commercial. Okay.
Yeah, it's I believe that's zoned B4 commercial. That's what for the old gas station that was up there.
Yep. Yep.
And it lands further to the east. We have some small industrial remnant area that was legacy industrial. So I mean there could be a possibility of changes, but until we have some kind of
steps forward.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. Are there any plans to extend Vine Street in the short future?
It's not on. Yeah, it's not in the near future for extending that.
Any other questions? If not, I believe we're looking for a motion to set a public hearing.
I'll make a motion to set the public hearing.
Thank you. Was there a second?
I'll second it.
Wonderful. Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of setting the public hearing, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then finally, number 2, discussion and recommendation to amend zoning code regulations, including section 17.11, para 3J, regarding pool location requirements. And we're going to change it up and switch to Mark.
Good evening. I won't go through the entire memo, but this parallels what the Plan Commission had experienced previously regarding sheds on corner lots and in side yards on interior lots. We have a request from several people that has been passed on to us through the mayor's office, asking to be allowed to have pools to be located within side yard portions on corner lots. Our corner lots do not have rear yards by definitions under our code, and the codes expressly permits pools only in a rear yard. So right now, as it exists in our code, pools are not allowed within side yards or on any yard of a corner lot, and only in rear yards of interior lots. We've been asked to see if the Plan Commission would consider amending the codes. We did such an amendment for sheds in the past. You approved that those changes requiring a site plan approval for any of these to be, any of the sheds within the side yards. to be issued permits, so that we could consider materials, screening, and impacts on the adjoining properties. You could, if you wish to consider a similar move on this, we could create the companion ordinances for that and bring it back to you for discussion at a public hearing as well. If you want to move forward, or if there are other changes you want to make to the code, we are open to adding that type of information as well. I can only say that our code has been this way since 1988. Prior to that, there were no regulations that we can find on pools. After 88, this is what was in place. There have been pools that have occurred since 88 that either got permits erroneously, or they ended up replacing pools that were grandfathered, or they didn't take permits out and haven't been noticed in the past. So there are a number. You will, if you drive around, you will find pools that have existed in side yards, on corner lots, and side yards on larger lots, interior lots, without a lot of concern being expressed. So I think it's an item that you could consider amending the code to.
Thank you. So this is just a discussion that we'll open it up for, and I see Max's hand. Go ahead.
I just have the question to know if the code change or amendment would be specifically for corner lots, or if that would also embrace regular lots to be allowed to have this, if the dimensions allow.
It's at the Plan Commission and Council's discretion, but I would suggest that we treat all the lots equally. If it's appropriate to put it in a side yard on a rear lot, if you have a large enough lot to meet setbacks and the rest of it on an interior lot, there would have no other detriment unique to it. So,
thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Yep. There, go ahead.
I assume it's above ground and in-ground pools? It's just pools in general?
It doesn't, our code doesn't discern between above ground or in-ground. It only, other parts of the code define the pools that are regulated as being over 1,000 gallons and over a certain size. I want to say 24 inches, Jim? 22?
I believe it's 24.
In height.
And then there's also some portions of the code too that talk about inflatable pools and stuff like that.
The smaller pools, the temporary pools are not regulated by this.
What's the setback? So if my neighbor is next and he wants to put a pool on the side of my property or on his property, what's the setback on that?
6 foot
Really?
setback from a property line.
Oh.
And that's how it exists, right? If they were putting it in the rear yard today, it'd be
It's
6
6
foot off
feet.
the rear or the side lot lines within the rear yard. There's also other restrictions that they have to observe. They can't put them right underneath an overhead electric line serving the house, for example. You have some other separations and grounding requirements for the different types of electrical services for the pool filters and heaters type things. So there's a number of, none of that would disappear with this. The setbacks wouldn't change unless you choose to do so. The only thing we would suggest is that the whole purpose of this, from what we can tell of the code, was that pools, unlike sheds, you don't expect to see them in a front yard or visible in a side yard. And people wanted privacy and they didn't want to have it intrude on neighbors, so they put the restriction for rear yards. I'll also point out at the time that code revision, the houses that were being built and the sizes of lots that were being constructed on wouldn't have facilitated putting pools in side yards.
All right, and I think we had a question from Commissioner Dolnick.
I'll talk loud because my mic is Is there, I assume there is a restriction on how close the pool can get to the front yard? If we were to, okay, right now, that's not an issue, it's restricted to the backyard.
Correct.
And maybe this is hard to answer with a corner lot, but regardless, whether it's a corner lot or just a house with enough side yard, how close to the front yard can it be?
By definition, the street yard would extend to the front of the building. So the side yard would be from the front of the building back to the back property line on a corner lot.
Commissioner Newman?
Mark, you said treat all lots the same. Do you need a permit now and a building permit and a site plan for the city to put any pool in?
No, you do not need, you need a plat of survey to show where you're putting it relative to the setbacks, but not a site plan per se. We don't worry about grades or the rest of it. They want to know where the features are, such as the electric lines and that sort of thing, which is usually depicted on the power poles are depicted and that sort of thing on a plat of survey. We wouldn't be, like the sheds, we wouldn't be asking for an involved site plan on this as well. We would probably treat most of it for being the typical information we get from a plat of survey. There might be exceptions to that, though. There are some of these yards that have easements, that have grade differential that have to be addressed in order to put a pool there, and we would ask them how they would do that as part of that submittal.
So if all lots, would everybody have to get a building permit then for a pool?
They have to take out permit today. They would still have to take out the permit. They would just be allowed to ask for it in the side yards. If you mirror the information we did on the shed ordinance, it's simply, they basically come to us with a very modest site plan, predominantly a plat of survey, and we would review it. And if it was a questionable item, like we did with the sheds, we would recommend that the staff would refer it to the Plan Commission for a final determination, if it was a more complex or looked like it could be an issue. But in the rear yards, they would still continue to get them by right without the extra information.
Any other questions? I was just curious. We tackled sheds. We're looking at pools. Are there any other accessory structures that we should be looking at the same time that fall under this?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
That's not to say someone won't come up with something in a few.
Just making sure. All right. Well, then I think you got at least some direction here that we can move forward, and we can go from there.
If that's the consensus, thank you.
That'd be great. And seeing no other business before the Plan Commission, I'll adjourn by the call of the chair. Have a good evening.